Well, good morning, everyone. It is about 7 in the morning, and one of the hardest things about the morning so far is that a nice down sleeping bag is really comfortable in 45-degree weather. The other thing is that it gets sunny at like 5:30. It is already, sun is up and it's bright. It's day. Sleep is like just this huge inconvenience. There is a little bit of rain on the way. Big surprise. It'll be here at about 9:30. So if I'm going to stay ahead of it, today is the day that I traverse onto the other side of Superior. There isn't a lot of people that live around there. Gas stations are very few and far between. Population density is very low. I'm calling this part of the trip the wilderness portion. That part of Ontario is still pretty populated compared to like one highway out. There's even fewer people. When you go beyond that, there's even fewer people. And then if you go even farther beyond that, in the territories, there's even fewer people. Canada is just gigantic. It's like an onion. It has layers. It's cold. I do not want to get up. Of course I have to. So moving to the other side of Superior is going to be the next trip. I'll make some coffee and something to eat, and then I gotta hit the road. But let's get a move on here. Let's go.
Today I head east, moving deeper into the sparsely populated interior of Ontario. I begin by taking the Terry Fox Courage Highway, the highway discussed in episode 15, to make my way around the three bays that make up the northwest part of Lake Superior: Thunder Bay, Black Bay, and Nipigon Bay. Two of the bays are separated by the Sibley Peninsula. The Sibley Peninsula is home to a very large geological formation known as the Sleeping Giant. From Thunder Bay, even in a couple of my shots across the bay, you could see this large landmass protruding out of the lake to the east. The Sleeping Giant itself is a provincial park, much like Kakabeka Falls is, but it's much more serious if you're a hiker. The Sleeping Giant Provincial Park has over 100 kilometers of trails, the longest of which being 40 kilometers long. It's warned that only experienced hikers will be able to get to the top of the Giant to see the view. The park takes up most of the peninsula, other than the small city of Silver Islet that acts as the hub where hikers and park visitors can stock up on provisions, all oriented around the Sleeping Giant. So why is it called the Sleeping Giant? It turns out that the name Sibley of the Sibley Peninsula, the rock formation, and Silver Islet are all connected. And I believe the best way to tell this story is by telling the Ojibwe legend of the Sleeping Giant. The legend itself isn't that old, it's actually quite recent. Also, before I tell the story, keep in mind that legends like these that are passed on through oral traditions tend to differ greatly. Rarely are two stories like these the same. Here is the legend of the Sleeping Giant that I happened across. This First Nations legend actually begins with the arrival of the white man. The white man was destroying the Ojibwe way of life with their diseases and firewater. The spirit of the deep water, known as Nanabuzo, came to value the Ojibwe way of life and decided to reward them for sticking to the old ways. The name Nanabuzo is also contested. The spirit of the deep water is known by several similar names, each with different pronunciations. To thank the Ojibwe for being so pious, the Great Spirit gifted them by taking an Ojibwe chief to the location of a rich silver mine. The Great Spirit warned the chief that if the white man ever found the location of the silver mine, the Great Spirit would be turned to stone. Forever grateful, the Ojibwe began to mine the silver and wear it with their tribal ornaments. They would even wear it into battle against their rivals, the Sioux and Plains tribes like the Dakota and Lakota. As I've explained in many episodes of the past, the Plains tribes and the woodland tribes of the upper Midwest would often attack each other. You can see an explanation of their linguistic differences back in episode 10 when I told another Ojibwe legend, the legend of Green Mantle. Anyway, the Sioux and Ojibwe were longtime foes. In battle, however, there was one thing the Ojibwe seemed to have that the Sioux did not. Some of the jewelry that the Ojibwe would wear into battle was made of a shiny, uncommon metal. The Sioux coveted this rare type of rock as they had no idea where the Ojibwe found it. They would steal it off of fallen Ojibwe warriors. When captured, Ojibwe warriors were pressed to find out where the metal came from. Even under torture and death, the Ojibwe would never give up the secret location of their silver mine. As the legend goes, the Sioux chieftains convened in a council and decided they were going to try to find the source of the Ojibwe's silver. It was no doubt also valuable to the white man, and taking it from their old enemies could strike at the heart of the Ojibwe economy. To find the mine, they would need to send a specialist. They brought forth their most sly and cunning scout, no doubt someone who could speak Ojibwe perfectly without an accent. His mission was to dress as an Ojibwe, find his way into their lands, and find the source of the Ojibwe silver. Eventually, the spy did find the silver mine and stole some samples to prove to his chieftains that he'd found it. On his way back, however, he stopped at a trader's post to buy food. He had very little to trade, but recently, he had conveniently acquired some silver. The white men were astonished at finding a Sioux with so much silver and got him drunk to trick him into leading them to the mine. The white men climbed into a boat with the Sioux and spy, and they sailed out to find the silver mine. As soon as the white men laid eyes upon it, a huge storm broke out over the lake. It was so strong that it capsized the boat and killed both the white men and the spy. The following day, the most extraordinary thing had happened. Instead of a wide opening in the bay, a large rock outcrop in the shape of a sleeping man had appeared. The prophecy had come true. The Great Spirit had been turned into stone, which is now today known as the Sleeping Giant. I'm still making my way around the north shore of Lake Superior, and I indulge in one of my favorite travel habits, stopping at local diners. The local paper has an article on the same group I saw practicing in Thunder Bay. It turns out they were preparing for the 150th anniversary of Canada festivities. One part of the legend of the Sleeping Giant is certain. The white man did find the source of the Ojibwe silver. A New Yorker by the name of Alexander Hamilton Sibley would purchase the land and mining rights, taking on the seemingly challenging silver mining opportunity. Sibley would name the company the Silver Islet Mining Company. And this was a fascinating discovery. Alexander Sibley was the brother of Henry Hastings Sibley. Henry Sibley was the first governor of my home state of Minnesota, the leader of Minnesota's military forces during the Dakota War, and he also led campaigns into the Dakota Territory and fought battles against the Lakota war chief Sitting Bull. I have many episodes where Henry Sibley is mentioned. Last Sibley fun fact, both those brothers, one a governor and decorated military leader, the other a successful president of the Silver Islet Mining Company, were both sons of the first mayor of Detroit and Chief Justice of the Territory of Michigan Supreme Court, Solomon Sibley. He is one of the few lawyers in the Northwest Territory when the U.S. first gained independence, which is kind of how their family got off to such a successful start. Speaking of successful, anyway, back to the mine. In its heyday, the Silver Islet Mine was the richest silver mine in the world. More than $3.25 million worth of silver was mined over the course of 14 years, which is worth around $90 million today. The Silver Islet Mine was uniquely dangerous and complicated. It was referred to as an engineering nightmare. Here is another one of my wonderful crude diagrams. This is Silver Islet. This is Lake Superior surrounding it, a lake so large and so far north that it's chilling cold even in the hottest summer months. I know from personal experience. Structures were built up on the islet to house all the materials needed to dig the mine shaft, collect silver, store coal for the pumps, among other things. Dikes were constructed to keep the lake out, expanding the amount of land available for mining operations. This would be necessary as the mine shaft was to be dug just offshore. Pumps were placed around the islet to keep the water out. The islet needed to be stocked with coal year-round to keep water from filling the mine shaft, as well as pump water out of the mine shaft that would constantly fill up as groundwater would leak in. The mine shaft was a quarter-mile down, which by comparison was over 3 times deeper than the islet is long. The miners would work underground, surrounded by water, surviving only by way of water pumps with candle-lit mining hats as their only source of light. In the winter, ice flows from the lake would constantly tear down dams and batter their structures and equipment. As legend would have you believe it, you could say that the Great Spirit of the deep water was doing everything it could to keep the silver buried beneath the waves of Gitchigami, as the Ojibwe called Lake Superior. This was one of the most dangerous mines in the world. Finally, in 1884, the mine closed, but not because it ran out of silver. In fact, the mine was closed after a steam freighter failed to deliver a vital coal shipment that was used to keep the pumps running that kept the mine dry. Without the coal shipment, the pumps died and the mine flooded, ending 14 years of operations. It was deemed too expensive to shore up the dams that held back Lake Superior. Without factoring in engineering and labor costs, the land was bought for only 7% of the cost of the value of the silver mined out of it. From above, you can see a lot of the remains of the dams and mining operations that still lie under the waves over 150 years after mining operations began. The city of Silver Islet would end up becoming a ghost town before it attracted Canadians that would buy up the old mining shacks to use as summer homes. Today, in the Sibley Peninsula named after the mining magnate, the Sleeping Giant remains a large source of ecotourism, and the city of Silver Islet, that supplies the tourists of the park, is a source of historical tourism. A trip down the peninsula and back would be over an hour just by riding, and today I unfortunately don't have the time. I continue north and eastward, up the Terry Fox Courage Highway, toward Nipigon, the farthest north I've ever ridden from home.